Okay, so I've got my collar on. I made sure there were no pleats, nothing. So now I'm going to take, and you can see I've already trimmed out. So I've taken my collar stand piece that was on the top as I was sewing. I've trimmed that down to about 1/8 of an inch. So I want to trim it down nice and narrow. Then I've taken the neckline that I have all the clips in, and I've trimmed that down, taken about 1/4 of an inch off. So it's about 3/8 of an inch wide. You don't want to trim that too narrow, because what's got to happen is it's got to all be pressed up. So now you're going to press it from, you can press it from this side and just press everything up towards the stand. So everything we've sewn is getting pressed up into the stand of the collar. So then when you turn it over, you can see how everything is now pressed up inside and it's hidden. Okay, and I've trimmed out what we don't need, so there's not a lot of bulk in here. So I've got it all trimmed, and now the last step that I want to do is I want to stay stitch this neck closed. So I've got my little sewing needle. Just going to moisten the end of this thread the eye of the needle. So I'm gonna do this with a single strand. I prefer single for this kind of thing. I just think it looks a little bit neater. So then you're going to take and you're going to put the thread between your thumb and your pointer finger and just kind of cross them over. Take your thumb and just kind of roll the thread so it curls on itself, and then your middle finger, you sort of grab it with your nail and you just kind of pull it down, and it will form some sort of a knot. Sometimes it's a little neater looking than others, but you will get a knot in the end. If you've got a lot of bulk and tail there, you can trim that off. Just keep the knot part. Okay, so I'm going to start at one end. Now you will want to either put some pins in here to keep this down. If you've pressed this really well, like given a really good press and put, I'm just going to trim this. So taken and pressed it really good, given it a good press, take the clapper to it, flatten it out. You should have this seam really nice and flat. You won't need to have a lot of pins. Generally what I do is I just put a few pins in down the middle. And the other thing you can do is I've got just a row of just a double-sided tape here that it doesn't gum up your needles, and it actually washes out the first time it's washed. It's a Dritz product called, it's a sew and wash away tape. And I think if I give it just a tiny bit of a press here as well, it will heat up that glue a bit and have that stick. So the idea is you don't want to see your stitching line, but you also don't want this way over into the body of the shirt, okay? So I've got my needles, or my sewing needle, I've got it all threaded. I'm going to start about 1/4 of an inch back in the stand. I'm going to take a row of stitching, so now my knot is tucked up inside. And then I'm going to grab a little bit of the neckline of the shirt and just get a stitch in there. So now I've got my needle in the neckline stitching, and I'm going to take on an angle at about, maybe no more than 1/4 of an inch over, and grab a piece of the collar stand, give it a little tug. You should not see this thread from the right side, okay? So I'm coming through, and I'm actually in the seam allowance of the shirt where the collar was sewn. So now I'm putting in just a little stitch, and you're just going to come back. So your stitch is coming out of the top here. Of course, I've got a thread that's the same color as the fabric, so it's a little hard to see, but my thread is coming out here. So I'm going to grab a little bit right below it, and then on an angle, moving over about 1/4 of an inch, coming only through the stand, I'm going to take a stitch, again, right below it, and make sure every once in a while, flip your fabric over, make sure you don't see the needle. Then again, over about 1/4 of an inch, give it a little tug, and just proceed all the way across the back of your shirt. And you're picking up just a few threads, and like I say, keep going back over, having a good look. So just on an angle. So you can't even, from this side, even though this is actually a rusty colored thread, but you can't see any of the stitches, and you won't be able to see. Now I've got a bit of stay stitching on here in the blue. I'm going to take and pick that and remove that. I could have done that either before I stitch this down, or I'll do it after. So I'm going to sew this all the way across, and then I'll have my collar stand all sewn. So the last step, if you choose, you can actually take this back to the sewing machine, and you can take and you can do a row of edge stitching or top stitching about the same distance as you did your collar. So either 1/4 or 1/8 from the edge of where the stand and the collar join, all the way around to this curve, and then you can go and turn and do the other narrow side of the collar. That's just an optional thing. It's not necessary for this collar. The way you're going to close this collar up is by slip stitching it closed. Okay, so that's our collar. Now it's all sewn on our shirt, and I'll bring my little mannequin over here. Let's see if we can get it. Make sure you can see when I get this on the okay, so there's my little body here. So now my shirt, turn your collar down. Now still got a few pins in here. So on this shirt, my my placket for my buttonholes is on the left side. Yours may be on the right. But now you can see how that collar is going to sew up. This little guy's neck is a little bit bigger than the neck of the shirt here. So there's my little collar on. Let's get it forward. Have a little bit better look at that there. So there's the collar. So my buttonholes are going to be coming down along here, and I'll have one here if I want to close that collar up. Okay, so the next step is going to be we're going to work on our sleeves.